And joining us for more on the US-Saudi Arabia talks is Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, retired. General Hasnain is a former general officer commanding of the Indian Army's 15 Corps and 21 Corps. The 15 Corps is responsible for military operations in the Kashmir Valley, and 21 Corps is headquartered at Bhopal in Madhya Pradesh. General Hasnain today is the Chancellor of the Central University of Kashmir and a member of the National Disaster Management Authority. General, welcome to DD India News Hour. Now, a news report in the New York Times is headlined, "Once a Pariah, Saudi Prince resets US relations on his own terms." Does that pretty much sum up Mohammed bin Salman's talks with President Trump?
Yes, I think very much so. But more significantly, Ramesh, I think it signifies the changes in the geopolitical setup in the last 2 to 3 years. In the last 2 to 3 years, in fact, in the Biden administration, the Saudi Arabians had become more pariah in their status. But Trump came back, and now with what has happened in Gaza, you've seen Israel dominate Gaza, you've seen Iran and Israel at war with each other, subsequently the war with the various proxies. So there has been a general reset in the whole of the Middle East. Saudi Arabia obviously emerges as a very important strategic partner for the United States. All these years, you had special status, the non-NATO allies status given to several countries, such as Japan, South Korea, you had Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, Israel, but Saudi Arabia was missing out of this. Now I think that status has been gained, and that signifies actually the reset in the Middle East.
Indeed. General, could you tell us about the significance and implications of the US making Saudi Arabia a major non-NATO ally?
See, Ramesh, a major non-NATO ally is really not, it doesn't really imply a military alliance in any way. It places Saudi Arabia in a very high select group of America's closest strategic partners. I just read out the names of some of them.
Right.
Japan, South Korea, Australia, Egypt, Jordan, Israel, etc. It gives a privileged access to advanced US technologies, systems, joint training, military financing, very importantly access to all kinds of sensitive technologies that the United States keeps developing from time to time. And interestingly, Pakistan has also had this status since 2004. In 2004, as a reward for Pakistan's contribution to the United States' efforts in the AFPAC region, Pakistan was also accorded this particular status. Although it got diluted after 2011, particularly after the finding of Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, and thereafter subsequently in later years too. But that status officially still continues to remain there. What the Saudi Arabians have achieved is that with the interest being taken here by the Chinese, by the Russians, and their strategic partnership virtually with Iran, what the Saudis have done is virtually balance that, offset that with this partnership with the United States.
So you are suggesting thereby that Russia, China, Iran on one hand, and we have Saudi Arabia, Israel, the US and others on the other side. Is that how you look at it?
Absolutely. This is how
Fair enough.
Virtually the north-south kind of a divide,
Indeed,
geostrategic divide is emerging in the world.
fair enough. Now, both sides also, General, agreed on a strategic defense pact which strengthens their more than 80-year-old partnership and fortifies deterrence across the region. Now, what will this pact entail?
See, this pact will really not entail anything substantial in immediate terms.
Okay.
But I think it's a psychological boost. That's one of the most important things. It's a foreign policy psychological boost to the Saudi status as such. Besides that, the United States adds a level of deterrence to this Middle Eastern interests, which are fairly high. A lot of people imagine that ever since the discovery of energy in the United States has perhaps diluted its interests in the Middle East. That's not so. The Middle East continues to remain strategically a very important region. It's a crucible of ideologies and civilizations. it is also the crossroads of so many sea routes and land routes around the world between Europe and Asia and Africa, that region becomes a hub. In geostrategic terms, these hubs become centers of gravity, very, very important regions to take control of. The United States, by ensuring this particular agreement with Saudi Arabia, is only contributing to its own security status in the Middle East.
Fair enough. And looking at from an Indian perspective, General, how do you think New Delhi would be viewing the US-Saudi Arabia talks? Will any of these outcomes impact India?
Ramesh, not immediately, I would say.
Okay.
But the interesting aspect that one should look at is the fact that the Saudis had a strategic agreement also with Pakistan only a few months ago. And now they've had one with Pakistan, with the United States. And it's not something which is very obvious that just because they've had something with Pakistan and they've had something with the United States, that this entire triangle is all ranged against India as such.
Okay.
No. Even when they signed the strategic partnership with Pakistan, a degree of assurance was given to India, behind back channel kind of talks were there which projected to India that none of this was against Indian interests as such. India's interests in the Middle East continue to remain the same. Our diaspora, almost 8 to 9 million of them there. Our remittances, $45 to $50 billion which come from there. It is basically stability which contributes to this. Our energy, the energy which comes from there.
Absolutely.
So stability is something which is very essential to Indian interest. And I think these kind of balancing strategic alliances of this kind only add to stability of this kind.
Absolutely, without doubt. Now, General, do you think these talks cement the perception that President Trump is one of the most transactional leaders in recent US history? I mean, just look at some of the outcomes of his talks with the Saudi Crown Prince. An investment pledge of $600 billion, which number has since gone up to potentially $1 trillion. Sale of US-made F-35 fighter jets to the kingdom. Civil nuclear energy cooperation and contract for US companies. Sale of semiconductors or chips. That's all it takes, the Saudi Crown Prince, to get President Trump to put the controversy over the 2018 killing of a journalist behind them and forge a qualitatively new relationship?
Something very interesting, yes, definitely. You may also like to recall the fact that just a few months ago, the United States also signed an agreement with Saudi Arabia for the provision of $142 billion worth of arms sales, right? It's well known that announcements of such deals always look at trillions of dollars, billions of dollars. What ultimately transpires on ground is not exactly that. Now, most estimates of the kind of signings which have happened between the United States and Saudi Arabia in the recent past seem to indicate that all that actually transpires is about $14 to $15 billion per year. This $140, $150, $180 billion is actually over 10 years. So it's a contribution of over $10 to $14 billion in a year.
Right.
Beyond that, it is not even physically possible for the Saudi Arabian armed forces, which are about 250,000 strong, to actually absorb all this weaponry at any time. They don't even have the human resources to be able to absorb this and be trained on it. So much of what is written, what is announced in international agreements of this kind tends to be more for psychological reasons and doesn't transpire always on ground.
Indeed. And finally, General, before we conclude our conversation, you referred to the West Asian dynamic obtaining in the region today as we speak, with Iran ranged against Saudi Arabia and Israel. Now, the Saudi side maintained that it will not make peace with Israel and sign up for the Abraham Accords until the path to a Palestinian state is agreed upon. Where does that leave Israel and how will it impact the wider region?
That's a very interesting observation and a good question, I must say. You see, we've been observing over the last 10 years a very strongly improving relationship between Saudi Arabia and Israel. That had given a tremendous strategic space to Iran to actually occupy and take the sentimental aspects of the Palestinian cause on its side. And as Iran had become essentially a main player, in fact, if you really look at it, right since 1979, when the revolution took place, this was one of the strategic intents of Iran to be seen to be the dominant Islamic force, the Shia revolution leading to the dominant Islamic force in the Middle East in competition with the Saudis. Now that's exactly, in case the Saudis go and sign up with Israel, you will find that the strategic space within the Islamic identity will all go in favor of Iran. This is not something which Saudi Arabia wants. And therefore they're treading very carefully on this. They will not just simply sign up like that, but the relationship with Israel will continue, without being on paper, will continue to be good.
All right, on that note, General, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspectives with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.